Hi guys, I'm Jess and today I'm going to take you through my January reads. These were mostly rereads and I thoroughly enjoyed them all, so let's get on with it. Rather boringly, the first book that I was reading for this year was an AAT exam on Indirect Text, which is basically VAT. I failed the exam, I need to retake it, so I've got to reread it at some point soon. Boring. Getting on to the more fun stuff, the second book that I was reading this month was a reread of Golden Sun by Pierce Brown. This is the second book in the first trilogy of the Red Rising saga, and as you all know, Iron Gold came out in January, so I had reread Red Rising and the Sons of Ares comics for December time in order to prepare myself and remind myself of all the wonderful and incredible amazing things that went on. Golden Sun is probably my favourite of the first trilogy. It is not one of those sequels that lets you down and is just a bridge to the next book. It is probably my favourite of that trilogy. It's absolutely fantastic, it's action-packed, it's paced, and there's such huge development. It's just an all-round incredible book, and any of you that ever maybe don't want to continue after Red Rising, because as I've said before, Red Rising is rather a lot like the Hunger Games for too many people, Golden Sun takes it completely out of that world. It is expansion to another level entirely. It's otherworldly from the first book. After that, during my car rides to and from work, I was listening to Cinder by Marissa Meyer. I've got a subscription with Audible, that's where I got it through from, and I was just Bluetoothing it on my car. It was really enjoyable. I can't say that I didn't see exactly where it was going. You could tell from the first instance of what this mystery person who has been missing forever was. You knew exactly who it was going to be, but maybe that, I don't know if that was the point or if it was kind of a surprise to people, I'm not sure. But I've heard a huge amount about that series, and so I thought I'd give it a go on Audible. And from an Audible experience, the accents were rather interesting. There's one particular chapter where there's a meeting between Prince Kai and a load of important ambassadors and presidents from around the world, and the accents are just hilarious. It was really funny to listen to, and it didn't take me long to read at all by audiobook, so it was really enjoyable, and I'm on to Scarlet now, so continue with this series straight away. The next book that I was reading was Morningstar by Pierce Brown, the third book, the follow-on from Golden Sun, and the last book that we've had since, I think, early 2016. So it's been a little while since we've had a new Pierce Brown book that wasn't a comic book. And the opening of this book is really quite emotional. It's really raw opening to a book, and again it just develops and it paces, and there's action and the stakes are huge, and there is confusion between the characters because so much that happened at the end of the book changes the way people see things in this book. It's so difficult to describe. I think I'm going to do a couple of reviews over the next couple of weeks for the Red Rising saga, and of course it'll be a case of, if you haven't read or are up to date with this book, don't watch the next one, and then I can really delve into it. I'm not sure whether I want to do spoiler reviews or non-spoiler reviews because it's a bit difficult. There's so much that goes on that you can't talk about without being spoilerish, so I'm going to leave it here. But a fantastic trilogy is the first trilogy of Red Rising saga, and I'm very excited for what is continuing in Iron Gold now. So the first book that I was physically reading for the first time this year was Rebel of the Sands by Alwyn Hamilton, and I was going to the Hero at the fall event at the end of January, so I wanted to have read at least the first book. I've had these on my shelves for ages. I've also got Traitor to the Throne, and I've had that for ages and just never gotten round to them. And an odd thing to have noticed when I eventually kind of opened up this book is that actually it's a really wonderful font that this is printed in, and the amount of words on the page is kind of relatively sparse and few, so it's a really quick read through the book. You can cut out quite a chunk of pages at a time because there's just not that much to read, and the pacing is very quick in here, and you just continue. The names are quite interesting in here. I think it's much easier to pronounce their nicknames than their actual names. The setting is not one that I see too often, that's not a kind of A Thousand Nights kind of setting. It's far more unique than anything else that I've read. But yes, this is something that I was told to get into a couple of years ago when it did first come out by Sally, the Dark Dictator, and I didn't get around to it till recently, and actually, yeah, it is fantastic. So the last book that I read in January technically took me a couple of days into February as well, but because I spent so much time on it in January, I think I need to include it in this wrap up rather than next month's, and that is Iron Gold by Pierce Brown. And this is my personalised copy that I got in the Illumicrate box that I spray painted myself in gold, because everywhere did sprayed edges. We had Waterstones black, Goldsboro red, but nobody did gold for Iron Gold, so I took it upon myself to complete that and get a really nice copy. I have now finished this, and I can understand where people are coming from saying that they're finding it difficult to get into this book because now we have 4 points of view rather than the one. It's interesting to have gone back to a series after peace is supposedly found, and to find that 10 years later, as this is set 10 years after Morningstar, to find that actually peace hasn't really been found and things are still happening and they're still fighting for the peace and things are maybe turning round on them. And I don't think you get that with YA trilogies. You get the trilogy, but you never get, you don't very often get 10 years after. And with new characters in it, I can understand why people are finding it difficult, but I thoroughly enjoyed this. I've said that these are all well paced. Pierce Brown's books are generally paced really well, and this was a new adventure for him to try and get 4 different characters in there. And he was saying that he had to do a lot of rewriting to get all of their arcs to kind of move at the same kind of pace. So I found that you would have one event happening for one character and then another, so it was always rolling at a good pace, that you would have something happening somewhere. And you've got kind of, after the first rotation of all the characters, stuff is happening rapidly, and then it kind of settles into itself a bit more and explains what's going on in the world, in the universe, as things have happened over the 10 years. It was a really amazing setup for Dark Age, which is hopefully going to be coming out this year as well, and this is also going to be a trilogy for the saga. So thoroughly excited for it. Really enjoyed his foils event in London, and Pierce Brown, Jerry, amazing guy, really lovely to talk to, and his writing is fantastic, and he's as big a nerd as you could meet. Those were my reads in January. It was a lot of rereading of Pierce Brown. Red Rising and Golden Sun, I think that may be my 3rd reread, and Morningstar, I think that was the 2nd time I was reading it. Before Dark Age comes out, I'll probably reread them all again because they are just fantastic. I did find that as I was rereading these, there were loads of battle sequences and characters and deaths and people that did live that I'd completely forgotten about. It's just like so much happens that it can really get jumbled about in your head, and I spoke to lots of people in the queue saying they hadn't done a reread, and I went, you're going to want to, because there's loads of characters in there you just won't remember, and it's totally the case. Like names, you have to go and search. It's a bit Game of Thronesy in that you've got to go and find all the family trees and search and go, ah, that's that person and that's what he's done. Just to wrap up, I will be continuing with Rebel of the Sands trilogy very quickly, I think, by Alwyn Hamilton, and I do think that I will do some reviews of the Red Rising saga, the individual instalments, rather than doing an entire big Red Rising saga video. I might do one after I've collected all my thoughts together in preparation for Dark Age, but we'll see how that goes. So there were some fantastic books that came out in January. Iron Gold was obviously at the top of my list. The Cruel Prince also came out. I need to get onto that as soon as possible, and so did Batman Nightwalker. Those should be really interesting books for me. They are right up my alley. I was just completely enthralled by Iron Gold and having Pierce Brown in the country, so that was what took all of my attention this month. So I hope you guys read some really good books this month. Let me know what you did read, what you would recommend me to read and pick up over the next couple of months. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!